This is Module 7 in the Smart Sales System training program. In the previous module, we talked about cold calling and provided a cold calling process. In this module, we're going to talk about how to do cold emailing and a process for cold emailing. And so how we're going to break this down, we're going to first outline some cold email do's and don'ts. Then we'll talk about how to build your cold email messages. Then we will talk about sending your cold emails and some tips around that. So let's just jump right in and start out talking about some key do's and don'ts. The first place we want to start is going back to one of our core concepts, which is trying to understand the prospect. We are trying to improve how we email and interact with prospects over email. So the first thing that we can do is try to understand the prospect that we're emailing and that we're trying to communicate with. And the first thing to understand and keep in mind, and this is one of the core concepts, is that the prospects that you're emailing are extremely busy. We need to factor this in terms of how we design and write our cold emails. Also, another core concept is that the prospect that you're emailing likely gets emails from a lot of other salespeople that are trying to sell something. Because of this, we need to factor that into how we write and design our emails. The next thing to understand is to become more aware that you're sending emails to prospects that are humans, and humans care about their own stuff the most. They care about a lot of different things, but what they care about most is their own stuff. So you're a salesperson, you care about selling your product the most. They care about their own company or their own job or their own life or their own interests. So if you are more aware of this dynamic, use it to your advantage to make your emails more about the prospect stuff and less about your stuff, and we'll show you how to do that. It's also extremely likely that at the time that you send your email, that the prospect is not in buying mode for what you sell. This is not to say that they don't need what you sell. This is not to say that you can't persuade them to buy your product. What I'm saying here is that when you click send on your email and it arrives at the inbox, most likely the prospect is not sitting at their desk doing a search for what you sell and thinking about buying what you sell. If you agree with that assumption, we can factor this into how we write and design our emails. If you design your emails that are very product selling, this is what I sell, do you need what I sell? There's likely to be a mismatch between what you're trying to talk about and what they're interested in at that exact moment. We can design our emails to be a little bit more open to decrease this mismatch, and I'll show you how to do that. And because prospects are extremely busy and they get a lot of emails from a lot of salespeople, most prospects will delete many of the emails they receive very quickly, sometimes without reading them. I refer to this as the instant delete, which is basically instantly deleting an email, deleting it very quickly. And we'll come back to the concept of instant delete here in a minute. Now, with all that, I want you to change your mindset. So if you follow your natural instinct, you're a salesperson, you have a product to sell, you want to make commissions, your natural instinct is likely, I want to write an email and design an email that gets the prospect to read my email, gets the prospect to reply to my email, and gets the prospect to buy my product. All of those goals and desires are very reasonable. You have something to sell, you want to sell it, you're about to send an email to a target prospect. What can you do to get them to buy and engage with your email? So there's nothing wrong with that. But what I want you to do is to change that just a little bit. So instead of thinking about all those things, let's try to minimize how quickly the prospect deletes the email. So sure, if you can create an email that gets the prospect to read it and reply to it, that's great. But what if we can make changes so that we decrease how quickly the prospect deletes the email? That would be a win and an improvement. And if we can achieve that improvement, then that is a step forward. Now, both of these sides are great, but one thing about everything that's on the left is that while these are good goals and good things to accomplish, and we shouldn't forget about all these, to try to only focus on these to achieve these things, it's fairly complicated and difficult. What I mean is to design the perfect email that gets the prospect to read it and to reply to it and to get them to buy your product. It is doable, but it's complicated and difficult to figure out that perfect mix. I'm not saying to not think about those things, but what's on the right side, there are a lot of very small and straightforward things that we can do to minimize how quickly the prospect deletes the email. And I'm going to talk about some of those. So what When we talk about decreasing how quickly the prospect deletes the email, let's get back to referring to that as the instant delete. The instant delete is basically when the prospect sees a bunch of emails in their inbox and they highlight all of them and delete them, or an email comes in and they read one sentence and delete it. If you can decrease how often your email is in that category, that's a win. So I'm going to go through some tips that decrease your instant delete rate. The first one is use brevity in terms of the word count and length of your email. There is a clear relationship between how long your email is and how quickly it gets instantly deleted. If you send a extremely long email, I'll get these emails on LinkedIn through the LinkedIn message window, and you just scroll and scroll and scroll. And it's all these paragraphs. And if I see that, I'll instantly delete it. When you think of this, try to think about when you were assigned a reading assignment, maybe when you were in school, and you might have went to look to see how many pages were in the book, or how many chapters you had to read, or how many pages were in the chapter. So think of that laziness for a reading assignment being the mindset of the prospect that receives your email. If your email has a lot of great, interesting information, but the email just appears to be very long, the prospect might not read any of it, maybe a sentence or two, and then delete it. If you agree with that logic, then the shorter your email, the better odds we have to decrease the instant delete rate. So my advice to you would be type out the email message that you want to send, then read it and look for any sentences or words that can be deleted. I like to think of the word count in an email being similar to like a suitcase when you're going on a long trip. And when you're packing a suitcase, you might put everything you want to take on the trip out on a bed. And then you may eliminate items that you can live without in order to fit everything in the suitcase. So you might come to the decision that instead of taking a brown pair of shoes and a black pair of shoes, you can get by with just the black pair of shoes. Do that same exercise with the email. You might find ways to consolidate two sentences into one and still keep the same thought and idea in your message. So go through that with your emails and think of it as every word and sentence you can eliminate while keeping your message intact is a win and is a step forward to decreasing the instant delete rate. So use brevity with your cold emails. They should be as short as possible and as few words as possible. And because our prospects are getting sold to a lot of cold emails coming in every day, as soon as our email looks like a salesperson trying to sell something, it can get instantly deleted. So with that, we want to decrease how much we sound like a salesperson trying to sell something in our emails. Now, if you're a product selling salesperson with a product selling email, your email is much more likely to get deleted. And if humans care about their own stuff the most, then let's make our cold emails more about the prospect stuff and less about the product that we're trying to sell and the company that we work for. Another thing to help with decreasing the instant delete rate is to decrease how much your email looks like a mass email. And I'll give you an example here to think about. Picture going to your physical mailbox at your home and you have a lot of pieces of mail. You likely throw away a lot of that mail very quickly without even opening it or looking at it. And those are often pieces of mail that might be in a very colorful envelope, professionally put together, might look like an advertisement, a company trying to sell something. And when you are able to quickly determine that, you're able to tear it up and throw it away without worrying that you might be missing something. Now picture that compared to one of those pieces of mail that you've received being a plain envelope with your address and the return address being handwritten. You will likely open that envelope and look at it very closely before throwing it away. And the reason why is because that is clearly something that is sent one-to-one, something that someone put together specifically for you. And you want to make sure that you're not missing anything, because if it's one-to-one, you might be missing something. And so you can use that same dynamic with your emails. You might think that you're doing a good job by making your email look real pretty with images and links and graphics. And when your email looks real good, you might think that people might look at it longer or give your email more attention and more respect, but it's actually counterproductive. When they see that you've put in all that work, then it must be a mass email and it looks more like that advertisement in the mailbox that they can throw away. So what you want to do is you want to design your cold emails so they look more like the handwritten, plain, one-to-one envelope than the advertisement that looks real nice and pretty. And one of the concepts we've already talked about many times, which is don't sell the product, sell the meeting. We can apply this as a don't to our cold emails. So if we send an email that says, this is what I sell, do you need what I sell in some sort of way, that's selling the product. And we can shift from that to selling the meeting. Because our prospects are extremely busy, we can just assume that it's going to take multiple emails to typically get engaged and get their attention. And with that, we can just assume that we're going to have to send multiple emails to our prospect. So our cold email strategy can be not just send one email and then after that figure out what to do. Our email from the very beginning can be, I'm going to send this series of emails to the prospect. And because we're going to send multiple emails to the prospect, we can use those different messages to educate the prospect. So you likely have a long story to tell, a lot of information to provide. Instead of sticking all that information in your first email, which by the way, that would make your first email very long and likely increase instant delete rate. I mentioned a minute ago that I often get these very long emails in my LinkedIn inbox. That's typically where they put their whole story and everything they want to say in one message. Well, instead of that, we can break that story up, break your message up, and spread it across multiple messages. So what we're doing is we're educating the prospect over a series of emails. And ideally, we want to educate the prospect on who we are and why they should talk to us, or who we are and how we can help them, and why it makes sense for us to start the conversation, not necessarily trying to get them to buy our product. Don't be apologetic in your email. I often get emails where the prospect might say something like, I'm sorry to bother you, or I know you're busy, I won't take too much of your time. And while you should respect the prospect's time and be professional, there's nothing to apologize for. You're a business person, they're a business person, and you're just reaching out to see if it makes sense to talk. There's nothing to apologize for. And also, when you're apologetic, you're not showing that you have something of value. Think of it as though the product you sell is similar to a bag of money. And you're trying to see if that bag of money belongs to the prospect that you're reaching out to. If you had a bag of money that someone lost, or a wallet that someone lost, and you were reaching out to someone to see if they were the owner of that or it belonged to them, would you be so apologetic? You probably would not, because you know that what you have is of such value that you would be confident, and you would know that if there's a match between what you have and the person you're talking to being its owner, that they would be very interested in that. So you likely would not be apologetic. You should view your product or service in the same way, that it's similar to like a bag of money, because likely it helps your prospect to decrease costs or make more money or save time. And that's similar to a bag of money if they are a fit for what you sell. So you should be confident. And if you're being confident, you have no reason to be apologetic. And that's just a very weak and poor way to start out your cold email. Similar to that, don't question the status of any previously sent emails that you've sent. For example, did you see my last email? Did you read my last email? You never replied to my last email. I never heard back from you from my last email. This is an important tip worth saying, because I get emails like this every day. And I just want to show you how bad this looks with a couple quick examples. Hi, Michael, did you receive my email about candidates we have? Hi, Michael, I just want to see if you caught my last message. Hi, Michael, I just want to touch base. I didn't hear back from you. I reached out to you the last few weeks with no reply. Now, there's a couple things wrong with this. First of all, what is there to gain by questioning me on whether or not I've read your email? If you know that I've read your email, does that knowledge give you any type of advantage as to where you go? So you're asking something that really doesn't provide any valuable information. The other thing is that you're kind of calling out the prospect to see what the status is on their activity with something you've sent over. And it's something similar to like what a manager would do when checking on an employee. The prospect is not the equivalent of the employee to the employer. If anything, the salesperson is the employee to the prospect. And so similar to how an employee should not call out a manager in terms of the status of a task, a salesperson should not check the status of a task with a prospect. It's just a really poor way, in my opinion, to start out an email exchange. You don't need to start out the email that way. You could just, yes, you might need to continue to email the prospect a second, third, fourth time. And what you can do is you can just continue to email the prospect and not mention or refer to your previous attempts. Just continue to reach out to them. So now let's talk about building your email messages. And I come back to this slide, which is what we've talked about in the past. So on the left side, we have product selling, which is, this is who I work for, this is what I sell, this is what it does. Do you need what I sell? And on the right side is the more consultative approach. So the majority of cold emails that I receive are on the left side. And so just to show you what that looks like, hello, Michael, I'm a senior account manager with Company X. We provide product 1, product 2, product 3. I'm reaching out to see if you need what I sell. Can I schedule a meeting with you? Best regards. Now, while that might seem extreme in terms of being that direct of a product selling approach, that outline is very consistent with cold email messages that I receive every day. And this email basically breaks a lot of those do's and don'ts that I just mentioned. It's all about the salesperson, the product they sell, the salesperson's interest. It's focused on selling the product. And so let's talk about how to create emails that go a different direction. And the other direction could be using the consultative selling approach. And so on the consultative side, we have, this is how we help. These are the pain points that we help to address or the problems that we help to make go away. These are some questions I'd like to ask you. This is how I help to solve those challenges. This is the company I work for. Here's an example of another company or business that I helped. And what we can do is we can actually use each of these items here on the right side to create email messages. And we can very easily do that by using the sales message that we created a few training modules ago. So we went through this process to create a sales message selling web design services, targeting small businesses. And we created this sales message. And what that gave us is it gave us all those different building blocks. And what we can do is we can use those building blocks as basically email topics. And so you can go a couple different directions here. We could use those as email topics and create one email from each of those building blocks. So we could create a value points email, a pain points email, a pain questions email, and so on. Another direction you can go is, let's say we have 3 different bullet points in our value points building block. We could break that apart and use each bullet point to create a different email. So we could have 3 different value points emails and maybe 3 different pain points emails. Now I'm going to give you some templates that you can use here today. The templates I give you actually keep all those together, and we just provide one email for each building block. Let's talk about email subject lines. This is actually a big topic that people often ask about. What's the best way to create good subject lines that get email opens? And so when someone asks the question, what should I put in a subject line that gets someone to open my email? That actually aligns more with the mindset that I suggested that you should move away from. If you recall, the mindset that I suggested you move away from was, what can I do to get someone to read my email, reply to my email, buy my product through my email? And while those are all good things, those are more difficult. And to create subject lines that somehow trigger more open rates is something to think about. And if you have ideas there, that's great. But what I suggest is to think about it the other way. There are email subject lines that can influence an instant delete. And I suggest avoiding some of those. And so my logic is I want to use a subject line that doesn't necessarily motivate an open, but it also doesn't motivate the instant delete. So some things that can motivate an instant delete is if your subject line looks like you're a salesperson trying to sell something. So if you use all caps, if you use exclamation points, if you use emoticons, if you use discussion around promotions or discounts, those all can make you sound like a salesperson that's trying to sell something and can trigger an instant delete. So I suggest avoiding those and not using any of that. And what you can do instead of that is I think you can use any of your building blocks as actual subject lines. So if we have 3 value points in terms of benefits of how we help, each of those could be a great subject line, or your pain points can be a great subject line, or your pain question that you ask could be a good subject line. So using any of the bullet points that you brainstormed as part of your consultative sales message usually can be good subject lines. And so let's look at some of the templates that this process provides us. Here is a value points cold email message. So as you can see, the subject line is actually the same as our first value point in the email. Increase the revenue generated through your website. And then the email is very short. The reason for the email is we help small businesses businesses to benefit 1, benefit 2, benefit 3. Then I do a soft little takeaway. I don't know if you want to improve those areas, and that's why I'm reaching out. And then I go for the close, and the close is not to sell the product. The close is to try to start the conversation. Are you available for a brief 15 to 20 minute call where I can share some examples of how we've helped other small businesses to generate more leads through their website? Best regards. So a very short email message there. This email is very tight on word count. You could say, it doesn't say anything about what I do or how I help. And that's true. And we do that on purpose. We do that for a couple reasons. One is if we explain more on what you sell and what you do, email will be longer. You'll look more like a salesperson's trying to sell something. You might give the prospect less of a reason to respond or give them a reason to disqualify you as someone that they want to talk to. In addition, we know we're going to send more emails to the prospect, so we don't have to say everything in this first email. Now, here's another email that we can generate from our building blocks. This is a pain points cold email message, and we're using a pain point as the subject line. Website visitors are not converting to customers. Hello, prospect. The reason for the emails, we help small businesses with the challenges of pain point 1, pain point 2, pain point 3. I don't know if you're concerned about any of those areas, and that's why I'm reaching out. Are you available for a brief call? So very similar structure. We're just basically replacing the value points with the pain points that we help to solve. The next email uses our name drop building block. So the subject line includes a benefit that we delivered to this name drop customer. And then the email is, hello, prospect. The reason for the emails, we worked with an accounting firm and they needed to generate more leads online. To solve this, we helped them to redesign their website, and this helped them to convert more traffic. Ultimately, they were able to increase the amount of revenue they generate through their website, and then goes for the close for starting a conversation. We can use your pain questions as a cold email. So the subject line is one of our pain questions. Get more revenue out of your website. Hello, prospect. I'm trying to determine if we can help you in the same way we've helped other clients. These are some of the questions that I would like to ask you. Question 1, question 2, question 3. Do any of those connect with a challenge or interest that you have? If so, let's put a few minutes on the calendar. Now, what I would say is we're using basically your pain questions building block to create a cold email. Now, I will admit that this is not the best cold email of the series. If you were just going to send one email to your prospect, I would not send this one. But when you put it together in a series and you've already sent them 2 or 3 other emails, this is a good email to send as follow-up. The way that you're kind of positioning this is that at this point, they haven't replied or you haven't gotten a hold of them. In our series, this is basically typically email 4. And these are some of the questions that you want to ask them. So at this point, you're kind of struggling a little bit to get engaged. And your goal when you get engaged is to ask some questions. So at this point, you're just kind of starting to throw out your questions in an email. Hey, these are some of the questions I'd like to ask you. So like I said, it's by itself, it's not a great email, but it can serve its purpose when you're sending it out as part of a series. Now, we can use the product building block to create a product email. And I've already said a lot that we don't want to do product selling in our cold emails. This also would be a later email in the series. And I'll show you how these all fit together, but ideally this would be email 5. So at this point, you've sent a few emails and you haven't gotten engaged and you've been avoiding being sort of a product selling salesperson. Now you're going to get a little bit more direct and you're going to say, hey, the reason why I'm reaching out is we sell this and that. And some ways we differ is here's some ways we differ. Are you available for a call? And so this is email 5. Now, if anything, 95% of the emails that you're competing against send an email like this as product 1. So if you follow our approach, this is email number 5. So you've greatly reduced your directness of being a product selling salesperson, and you're basically getting to product selling towards the end of your series. Now, here is a last attempt email. Now, we just sent our product email using our product building block, and after that, we can start to begin to walk away. And in our series, this would be email 6, and we would call this a last attempt email. So the last subject line is checking in. I never heard back from you, and I thought I would follow up one last time. The reason I'm trying to connect with you is that, and then what we do here is we repeat the value points. You could also use your pain points here if you prefer communicating with your pain points as a way to get attention, but this just uses your value points. Benefit 1, benefit 2, benefit 3. If I don't hear back from you, I'll assume you're not interested in those improvements or that you're not the right person to speak with, and I will close the file. If I should be contacting someone else regarding this, any pointing in the right direction would be greatly appreciated. Best regards. So that's sort of a last attempt cold email template. Now here's one last bonus email. And what I refer to this as, this is the keep us in mind email. So you might sell something that is very frequently purchased. Think of an office manager that frequently purchases office supplies, and you're emailing that person. And if we assume that the prospect is likely not in buying mode at the exact time they receive our email, then we can use that awareness as a way to design an email that does not try to sell at that exact moment, but coaches the prospect to keep us in mind so that when they transition back to buying mode, they can keep us in mind. So this is how the email goes. Since you're a small business owner, you might make changes to your website from time to time. We provide web design services, so please keep us in mind when you find yourself needing to change or update your website. Some ways that we differ from your other options are differentiation 1, 2, 3. Let me know if you reach a point where you would like to schedule a brief call to discuss. So what we're doing is we're trying to coach the prospect to hang on to this email and keep us in mind. And we're agreeing to the fact that most likely when they receive this email, they're not looking to hire someone to redesign their website or to buy office supplies or to buy some sort of insurance. So this is the keep us in mind email template, and it's using your product building block in terms of some of the differentiation details. So that is how to use your consultative sales message to create cold email messages, and we provide you with some templates there that you might be able to repurpose for your own use after you create your consultative message. Now let's talk about sending emails and some tips in this particular area. So I've just provided you with a number of different email templates, and you can string those together in what we call an email thread. So each of those are an email template, and when you tie those together to go out over a period of time, we refer to that as an email thread. And here's a way to put the emails I provided you into a thread. So email 1 is your value points. Then email 2 is pain points. Email 3 is name drop. Email 4 is pain questions. Email 5 is your product building block. And then email 6 is your last attempt. The amount of time between these is between 1 to 2 weeks. And what I would use to determine whether you have 1 or 2 weeks between these is that if you're doing calling in parallel with these emails, I would do 2 weeks between each email. So that gives you some time to basically make your calls. You might leave a voicemail after some of those call attempts, and you might send a voicemail follow-up email. But if you're not doing any calling, I would just maybe use 1 week between each email. And so that is how you can basically string these together. Now, I strongly recommend that you automate the delivery of your emails. You should automate your sales activities and tasks as much as you can. And the easiest thing for you to automate is the delivery of your emails. There are a lot of software tools out there that you can subscribe to where you can import a list of contacts, create email templates, send out an email, automate a series of emails, send out email blasts to thousands of people all at once. If you're not using one of these, I strongly recommend you use something like this, because what you're basically doing is you're cloning yourself. If you have a software system that is automating emails and sending emails where you're able to work on other stuff, you can work on a proposal while the software is sending out your emails. You go meet with clients while your software is sending out emails. You're basically replicating yourself, and you're having basically a robot version of yourself to do your email tasks. And it's one of the easiest things for you to set up and do. And so if you're not doing that, I highly recommend you do that. Now, also, you should try to track email opens and clicks for the emails that you send. Most of the systems that you can subscribe to that provide email automation will also do email tracking and provide this data for you. So you definitely want to be collecting this. It's great data to help you determine who you should be calling. And regarding who you should be calling, you can use that data on email opens and clicks to do some sort of lead scoring to see who your good quality leads are and who your good quality prospects are, so that when you're making your calls, you can spend your valuable time calling the right people. So for example, in the SalesScripter CRM, we do lead scoring by providing through a system that we call quality points. When you're sending your emails and a prospect opens your email, they get 1 quality point. When they click on a link in your email, they get 3 quality points. And those begin to add up when you're emailing these prospects over a period of time. That way, when you're making your calls, you can call the prospects that have quality points before or instead of the ones that don't. A real world example of this is that we have a list in our Sales Scripter account for prospects that have attended webinars. And you would think that we should call every prospect that attended a webinar, but we have 5,000 people on the list. And with the data of quality points, we're able to look and see that half the list has a lot of quality points and half the list has 0 or close to 0 quality points. So we should only be calling about half the list. And that data is extremely valuable because we can prioritize those calls or see that half the list we should not be calling at all. So this data is extremely valuable in helping you to determine who you should be calling. The next thing to think about is the scheduling of your emails or when you should send your emails out. Now, one thing to first think about here is remember, we're trying to decrease the instant delete rate. And one thing you want to think about is that when a prospect goes to their email inbox when they've been away for a while, their instant deleting is more frequent. They are more quickly to instantly delete. For example, let's say that it's Monday morning and they haven't checked their inbox all weekend. There may be a long list of emails unread. They're going to be more quickly going through that set of unread emails and deleting versus during the day when there are less emails unread, they might spend more time looking at each email. So what you don't want is you don't want your email to be sitting in a large group of emails either sent overnight or sent over the weekend. What I try to do is send my email during the day where the prospect might be at their desk. And the logic here is one is maybe they've already cleaned out unread emails, so they're out of their instant delete mode. And two is they might actually see the email as it comes in real time. So I like sending emails around 9 or 10 in the morning or 1 or 2 in the afternoon. The other thing to think about is how much time you put in between each email. So if you're doing cold emailing, I think 1 to 2 weeks between cold emails is good. We've already talked about that with the email thread. If you are emailing prospects that you've engaged with, that you've spoken to before, or maybe prospects that have opted in to receive information from you, you could send emails more frequently. For example, like we have an ebook opt-in list on our website. If you opt into our ebook email list, in the first few weeks of that email campaign, you'll get an email every 2 to 3 days. And then it starts to go out to 1 per week and then 1 every 2 weeks. Now, of course, everything we're talking about here today is emailing. So we're going to need prospects' email addresses, and you may have the email addresses of who you're trying to pursue, but it's likely the case that you're going to come across prospects where you know who they are, but you don't have their email address. And one thing that I did when I was in a role where I had to sell to CFOs, and I could get the name of the CFO of a business very easily, either on the website or through financial information, but those resources did not provide the email address. And I figured out pretty quickly that I could guess their email address because it would be some combination of their first name, last name, and then where they're working in terms of their company website address. And what I would do is I would guess using those 3 values. And this process works about 80% of the time, because when you do a guess, about half the time, the email will bounce back as undeliverable when you guess wrong. And then you can guess another of these different combinations and fire that email off again. And the other half of the time, it doesn't bounce back, and you can assume that maybe that got to the right person. So this process works. But I will admit that it's a bit cumbersome, especially because of the fact that when that undeliverable comes back, you're usually working on a different prospect or something else, and then you have to go back to guess a different combination and send the email off again. So this process works, and if you have a small number of key target accounts, you could use this guessing process. But if you are doing a lot of prospecting, it might not be practical for you to guess every prospect's email address. And we actually make this process easier because we provide a tool in the Sales Scripter CRM called the Email Guesser. And what this tool basically does, it takes the 3 values of you can enter the first name, the last name, and the company website address. And what the tool does is it basically creates all those different combinations that I just showed you. And it does a test ping for each. And the test ping will come back and tell us whether the guess was correct or not. And so you'll see a list of results that'll show you this is the good email address for those 3 values. And then you can then start sending your cold emails using that email address. Now, one last thing I want to talk about, and I'm not going to get this into too much detail. I'm definitely not an expert on this, but I have received some video and voice emails. And there's a bunch of different tools you can use for these. An example, I've received some of these on LinkedIn somebody, instead of sending me a email message that they typed out on LinkedIn that I might have instantly deleted, they record their message in an audio form and it comes over that way. And that could definitely increase somebody listening to your message because it's more tailored, might decrease the instant delete rate. There's also all sorts of screen capture and video recording tools where you can send some sort of video message to the prospects. So the only suggestion here is definitely get creative using different tools such as video and voice email messages to increase your ability to communicate with the prospect, to get them engaged, to decrease the instant delete rate. And that's pretty much it for cold emailing. The next training module is voicemail strategy. So we will talk about how to apply all of these concepts to your voicemail messages and when to leave voicemail messages and when not to leave voicemail messages. And we will talk about that next. That's pretty much it. If you have any questions, want more information, want more tips, best place to go is salescriptor.com. There are plenty of videos, how-to videos with sales tips. There are ebooks you can sign up to get for free. If you have questions about our software, SalesScriptor, the best place to go is here. Plenty of product information, or you can sign up. There's a chat window if you have any questions. And that's pretty much it. Hope this was helpful. Thanks for watching to the end of the video. We'll see you on the next one. Have a great day. Take care. Bye.